Hello.
Professor.
Should I start now?
Yeah, Professor, we'll wait next 5 minutes. Some
Okay.
people have classes, so they will be joining in next 5 to 10 minutes.
Okay, I understand.
Okay. Ma'am, what is your time there in Poland?
In Poland, it is 10:24 in the morning.
Okay. So I am Dr. Bharat, who emailed you.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, welcome to this international conference on intelligent and cloud computing. So this is second conference of this series. So the last conference was in 2019. Because of the COVID situation, last year we could not host this conference, and this year this is online. And, our university name is Sikkha O Anusandhan, which means education and research. And we recently got placed in QS ranking, 853 ranking. And we have 9 different institutes: medical, engineering, pharmacy, business, agriculture, and etc. And in eastern part of India, we are the #1 private institution.
Can I have one question, technical question?
Yes, please.
To share my presentation, I should choose the 4th button on the left, yes? On the bottom of a screen.
Yes, there is a. There are 3 buttons, and just next to that button there is a screen type image. So if you see,
I can see microphone, camera, raise your hand, and some rectangle with an arrow that someone is having a presentation now. So I assume that
I am having presentation. I am having the presentation. So formally, first I will provide your brief biography to the listener. Then you can share your screen.
Okay. Okay, I'm asking because I am not using Google all the time. At my work, we are using Microsoft Teams, so
yes.
all the things that I do are...
Don't worry, Professor, it will be no problem.
Okay, and then I have an hour to speak, yes?
Yes, around an hour, yes.
Okay, thank you. I am really happy to be here with all of you today.
We are also excited that we got your time for this conference.
Thank you. Okay, so we are waiting 3 minutes, yes?
Yes. मैडम 16 only. तुम्हें join करो मीटिंग join करो. Hello everyone, very good afternoon and welcome to the keynote session 2 of ICICC. Good afternoon, Professor. Second, sir, am I audible?
Yes, yes, your voice is a little bit slow, it is cutting, otherwise it is okay.
Okay, Professor. Okay. Let us welcome Professor Marta Jabłońska from Poland. So, Dr. Jabłońska is an assistant professor in Department of Computer Science in Economics at the University of Lodz. She has received her PhD in Economic Science in the field of Management Science. Currently, Dr. Jabłońska research focus on cyber psychology and artificial intelligence. This research deals with the impact of modern technology on individuals, societies, and business. Recent studies include the impact of social media, COVID-19 content on mental health, the use of neural network in psychological research and public administration. Comparisons to other users made on social media. Teaching experience include sociological and psychological determinants of the usage of new technologies. She has published more than 60 research articles in various journals. Welcome, Professor Marta. With us, program chair, Professor Srikant Patnaik is present here. Other faculty and authors are here.
Thank you, Dr. Bharat. I welcome Dr. Marta to the afternoon session of ICICC 2021. The inaugural session was over in the morning, where Dr. Marta was not there. So for the knowledge of Dr. Marta, I must tell that our university is within 20 rank of All India ranking. It is a deemed to be university, and we have all faculties: engineering, medical, dental, management, law, nursing, agriculture, whatnot, everything. And we have also one media house and one newspaper unit. And our computer science faculty is the largest one. We have more than 100 faculty, and we have a student base of 8,000. Each year we organize some of the conference. One of the track is say intelligent and cloud computing. So we are very happy to have you in our session. Usually we also conduct say each week seminar delivered by the experts from India, and exclusively we have one talk each month from outside India. So we'll love to listen you in some of the event in future. To begin with, I welcome you to deliver the keynote address on second international conference on intelligent and cloud computing afternoon session. Dr. Marta, the floor is yours. After that, we will have some discussion. Thank you. Welcome to you.
Thank you, dear Professor. Thank you for your warm welcome. All honorable guests, I am really happy to be with you today. And I will now share my presentation. So if you could let me know that it is visible, okay?
Okay.
Okay, I can see that it is shared. So is it also visible for you?
Just a moment. It is coming. Yes, it is visible now.
Okay, thank you very much. So without further delay, I will proceed. So welcome everyone once more, and thank you for your kind invitation. My presentation topic is learning systems in virtual identity studies. As well as I was introduced, my name is Marta Jabłońska, or maybe Jabłońska, it can be pronounced as you wish. And first I will talk a little bit about my work, and then we will go to the topic. So as it was told, I am a doctor of economic science in the field of management science, and my current position is an assistant professor in Department of Computer Science and Economics at the University of Lodz, and I am working here since 8 years now, so it's been quite a long journey for me. And on a daily basis, in both in my research and in my teaching experience, I deal with various areas, but mainly within social sciences and computer sciences, especially artificial intelligence, but also, this is not limited to artificial intelligence, but also cyber psychology. So both perspectives, psychological that focus on the individual, as well as sociological that is looking at the society as a whole. I study how people behave on the internet and how the cyberspace influence their psychological factors and other social phenomena. And artificial intelligence is very often a tool that I use to analyze and report my research. I believe that cyberspace is formed by some extent by our expectations, behaviors, desires, both us as individual persons and the societies as a whole. So if we are looking at the cyberspace from this perspective, virtual reality is some kind like a mirror that shows the image of a contemporary man. So it is a reflection of nowadays us. But of course, we should remember that cyberspace also contributes to the creation of new patterns of behavior and attitudes, so it affects individual and entire societies' patterns or even cultural norms. Even if we look at the labor market, we can see that jobs related to IT that were present, let's say, 10 years ago, looked very different from the IT labor market that we can see today. So this influence of the cyberspace is huge, but we should remember that this is mutual relations. So maybe cyberspace affects us, but we also create how it looks like. So this is a very multidimensional interaction on the basis of feedback that contributes to changes and the formation of a new identity. And this new identity, that is the core of our today meeting, is contained in a virtual identity. So, in my humble opinion, it is not only a fascinating research material for science, but also we can see how it is used in business. So it illustrates the behavior, including as well for business purchasing behavior. So us as customers, as consumers, this is also a very important part of these studies. So our online behavior related to virtual identity generates nowadays huge amounts of data. So therefore, analyzing it with a classical statistical approach is very often possible. But I think that implementing artificial intelligence tools seems a natural solution here. Although there are some strengths and weaknesses, as we will see a little bit further. So this is the agenda of my speech. So first, I would like to explain what I mean when I am using the word identity. To do this, we will have a little bit of classical approach. Then, in the second point, I will focus on the type of identity that is the most important today for us. So during our meeting, we will be focused on virtual identity. And here I will try to show you the features of virtual identity and also the possible risks of it. Then we will go to the AI part. And I've decided to divide it to 2 points. So we will be having a SWOT analysis that I think presents very clearly how we can implement AI, what opportunities it may give us, but also what weaknesses and threats it presents that we as researchers should be aware of. And finally, I will present you some of my recent studies that will illustrate the previous point about SWOT analysis. So, about identity construct. We may see that since the 50s of the previous century, there was a research regarding identity. I am not talking now about the classical Greek antique approach, but about more nowadays studies. This is why I'm using the 1950s as the first foundational works regarding the classical approach to identity. So, since then, the traditional meaning of identity has been expanded. So nowadays, perceiving of identity is not the same as it was these 70 years ago when the works begin. So now, identity is about recognizing the influence of various societal and cultural changes intertwined with the impact of globalization and, of course, technology, including the most important today for us during our meeting, cyberspace. So, if I should explain in one sentence what is identity, I could say that this is who am I? Yes, answer to question who am I, and you will see your identity. But of course, in a classical approach, in scientific approach, we are going a little bit to a wider perspective. So I will explain this perspective a little bit later on further slides, but now I would really like to outline, to put an impact on a thing that we should always remember, that our identity is a very dynamic construct. It is not something that has been given to us, why, for example, when we were born and this is it. No, we can work, and also our environment that we live in also influence our identity. So this is a very dynamic and changeable construct. To see how complex it is, we may see the slide here that shows you how complex, how multifaceted identity may be. So I will talk a little bit about this, but then I will make it more clear on the other side. So as you may see here, identity forms within 3 types of constructs. So social natural, social, and mental. And within social natural, we have factors that influence our identity, such as civilizational, ethnic, gender, geopolitical, so everything that surrounds us in our society, in the place of the world where we live. Of course, we should remember that nowadays, we are more globalized society, so this geographical context is some way more wide than it used to be, like say, these 17 years ago. And now social. Social is about many factors typical for society, so culture, maybe some subcultures, political, religion, personal, but also our business, professional issues, and of course, due to technology, digital and virtual. And finally, mental is a scientific paradigm, and also it may be affected by some business issues, like, for example, being very fond of some fashion brand or so other brand. Yes, so factors like this may also make us belonging to such a group. Yes, so fashion brand is just the example, but we may be also in other brands and not only limited to fashion that describes who I am. For example, being a big fan of some car brands. Yes, that also makes changes to our identity. But let's try to reduce this complexity. So these four distinct levels of identities may be distinguished and present us what the identity is in this society sociological perspective. So the first individual, then relational, social, and material, and I will have them explained right here. So individual, in other words, personal, deals with us, everything that deals within us. So here we have, for example, philosophical questions that from the beginning of humanity arise about ourselves by virtue of being people. This contrasts with questions about ourselves that arise by virtue of being also living things. So this perspective is wider than just being people. And during our lifetime, many of these questions occur to nearly all of us, and very probably more than once. So we are asking ourselves, what am I? Who am I? When did I begin? What will happen to me when I die? Why do I exist? Etc., etc. So since the ancient time and the origins of philosophy, these questions have been discussed. But not only, I am thinking here about scientists or philosophers or whatever, but anyone asks themselves. Yes, so this is not limited to some scientific dispute only, but to our simple lives, everyday life. And usually especially in psychology, this dimension is called the self. So sometimes self is the synonym of a person, but when we are looking more at the psychological facet of this term, it often means something different, so a sort of unchanging immaterial subject of consciousness. So this is the first perspective, individual. To sum it up, we can see that it is a set of relatively stable characteristics that we ascribe to each other. There are our global life story, and it includes our life goals, our beliefs, and the values that we have. Then we have a relational identity. This theory moves beyond neat social categorization of us and them toward a dimensional, dynamic understanding of interpersonal and intergroup relation. So in the opposite of this individual facet, here we are more in a relation with society, within a group. So as we feel that we belong to some kind of group, a religional, political, brand associated, hobby associated, job associated, whatever, we feel our relational identity with another beings, yes, human beings in this group. Of course, we should remember that this is also not a static thing. At any point, we may feel that these relations with a group are close or distant, open or closed, or maybe comfortable or distressed. So during our lifetime, we are changing our life goals, our beliefs, and this also influences the groups that we want to participate in. So, relational perspective means roles that we within a social feedback. So we, as a more group human being, yes, that we need this socializing. But let's go further to social perspective. This is very close to relational, but more focused of how we perceived ourselves because of the membership in the groups that we choose. Sometimes the fact that we belong to some group may be a source of a pride and self-esteem. So this influences a sense of social identity. We believe that we are not lonely, but we have a sense of belonging to the social world. And many psychological and social studies present that people who are in a kind of group divide the world to them and us. And based through a process of this social categorization, unfortunately, this also is an explanation of two negative behaviors. The first is stereotyping, and the second one is prejudice. So just think about some religion group or political group, or even some brands that are in the opposite of themselves. People also, unfortunately, have the tendency to group things together. So they may say that we are good, but they are bad, all of them. So this is a very cruel of stereotyping and prejudice effect. So this phenomena is known as in-group, that means us, and out-group, that means them. So the group members of an in-group will seek, not only see, but seek to find negative aspects of an out-group. And even in psychology, there were studies that when our group was formed by an accident, so totally random, people still had the tendency to this stereotyping and prejudging because they formed a group, no matter how much artificially, but they felt a connection as a group. So they didn't like the other groups in this experiment. So this social perspective may strongly affect our self-image. So to sum it up, the self-concept of individual tends to be largely determined by their perceived membership in various social groups. Groups associated with ethnicity, nationality, religion, gender, family, or even brand, as I told you a second ago. In order to maintain their sense of self, individuals are motivated to conform to certain group norms and expectations. So we are not only proud of who we are, but we are trying to behave like it is expected in this group. And finally, material. Material identity examines the way that we use material objects as tools to projecting aspects of their identities. So it focuses on the influence of material things that are a part of how we see ourselves. So these material attributes may be associated with status, so our wealth, but also the social role that we play, our profession, fashion, and many, many more. So they are a kind of attribute that let the world know who we are. So they are a thing that we may present ourselves to the world, but also we should be aware of that it also influences our identity. So it reflects the material extension of the self and references the extent to which humans view certain material artifacts, such as clothes, cars, or even places, as a natural element associated with their identities. So now, as we can see, what is identity? I will present you very briefly the identity theory, and it has been measured within 4 competing theories. And I think it is important to be aware of these theories, as they may influence the shape of our study, because we may use some of these theories to select the traits that we will study in our research. So the first is behaviorism, functionalism, non-reductive physicalism, and property dualism. So very, very briefly. Behaviorism is all about rewards and punishment. So it brings us something that we may call an outside external locus of control. So during this theory, all behaviors are acquired externally through the conditioning, so rewards or punishments. If we behave in some way, present ourselves to the environment, and we receive a reward, our actions are remembered as good. But when we are punished, we probably will change our behavior or just hide it sometimes. Yes, but it will affect our identity. Then we have functionalism. This is on the opposite, the theory about the nature of our mental states. So something that behaviorism is almost ignoring. So according to functionalism, mental states are identified by what they do rather than what are they made of. This is a theory that what makes something a mental state of a particular type does not depend on its internal constitution, but rather on how it works, what role it plays. So this comes from the Aristotle conception of the soul, and has also antecedents in Hobbes' conceptions of the mind as calculating machine. So to understand the functionalism, it is very helpful to think about our brain as computers. Then we have non-reductive physicalism that claims that all the entities of our world constitute an ontological and causal network. And fundamentally, this network is physical and, however, cannot be reduced or fully explained by neither laws or properties or maybe concept that the physical science can discover and articulate. So in other words, due to non-reductive physicalism, probably we will never fully explain how our identity works. And in the opposite, we have property dualism, according to which there is one fundamental kind of thing in the world, and this is a material substance. But it has two essentially different kinds of property, physical and mental ones. So, for example, a property dualist might claim that a material thing like a brain can have both physical properties, so it has a weight, a mass, a type of cells that it is built of, and mental properties, so our beliefs, feelings, and others. And these two kinds just are entirely different in kind, but in the opposite of non-reductive physicalism, they exist together. Okay, so we had plenty of theory here, but to summarize, we may say very simple that identity is what we feel, what we do, what we believe in, and what we identify with. So now let's go to our virtual identity. Virtual identity is quite a new type of social identity. So when we had these four factors that I presented you a few minutes ago, the social identity was the third of them, and virtual identity fits in it. So I think this is quite obvious. Then maybe it may differ between society, between individuals, but I think that we may say that our era that we live in has the very huge technology boom. So it has the potential to blur the boundaries between reality and fantasy. So cyberspace residents, internet users, can establish their virtual identities, and they are more easily coined according to our desires and expectations than the real self. So the fact is that with the information society approval, the virtual identity of social and individual life is formed, and we may very easily specify our gender, age, nationality, appearance parameters arbitrarily. So this is not a problem, for example, that I can make an account and create a virtual identity of being, for example, a man, not a woman. Yes, so it may have almost any or even any correspondence to reality. Some psychologists say that it is good because when we are performing this role-playing, we may more discover who we are. And some people say that this is not very fair to pretend to be someone else. So researchers are divided here. No longer confined by the physical realities and existential limitations, our virtual environments provide individuals with a clean slate onto which to construct their desired virtual identities. So when we will go back to this question, who am I? We may answer that we may be our real self and our virtual self. They may be almost identical or totally different. So We should perceive these two selves, real and virtual, not only be considered distinct entities, but also we should agree to the fact that they influence each other to some point. Yes, our virtual life also changes our aspects of our real self, so our identity. And here I described two important features of the cyberspace. As you may remember, at the very beginning of my presentation, I told that we create cyberspace, but also cyberspace have a huge impact on us. And I think that what you see here is an essence of why cyberspace changes us. So the first thing is escapism, also called immersion. And this is when we immerse, so when we go deep within cyberspace, the virtual world, the virtual identity. This may be a reality avoiding individual who builds his secondary world, the world of dreams, illusions, desires of the perfect life. And as we have said a minute ago, it may be totally different to his real life, the first world, yes? So the cyberspace replaces real things, processes, displaying them with the varying simplification degrees, and makes it possible to put in a good order social reality, modeling on the screen, created life situation where this individual feel like a creator of life, of the reality that he or she live in. So this person lives with it with enthusiasm in the new actual time, and not always realize that he goes deeper and deeper, that he is immersed more and more, and that maybe at some point he may escape from the real reality, let's call it, to the virtual one. So at this point, it may be becoming very dangerous. The second factor is this inhibition. Now, this term is used to describe why we behave differently. So it is also an explanation of all the things that we are doing with this role playing and changing our identity in a virtual and real life. So it describes the lowering of psychological restraints that we often have in our society to serve to regulate behaviors. So when we meet someone face to face, we are more concerned about the social norms. But as we will see on the next slide, in online social environment, these boundaries are very lowered. So it is reflected in reduced behavioral inhibitions and a lower regard for behavioral boundaries while being in the cyberspace may be expressed in various online interpersonal behaviors. But remember that not only negative, they can be positive as well. For example, someone who is a very shy person may be more self-confident. This theory of online disinhibition was coined 17 years ago by John Suller. You may see on the right the original paper when he describes this phenomena, and to explain this feature, we may divide this disinhibition effect on the two categories. The first benign in this inhibition. This is this facet of this phenomena that allows us to behave also positively. Of course, it may be negatively, but positively as well. But in toxic disinhibition, we see sources of only negative actions. So behaviors that includes rude language, hating, threats, watching pornography, crime, violence on the internet. So very often, people who do this online wouldn't behave like this face-to-face. But on the cyberspace, it is likely that they will change. So here you have the explanation. We have 6 factors. So the first one is dissociative anonymity, invisibility, asynchronicity, solipsistic introjection, dissociative imagination, and minimization of status and authority. To say it in a more easy way, the first one is you don't know me. That means that if you don't know me, this is nothing personal and you don't know who I am. I am, this is a very important word, anonymous. Then you can't see me. So I feel even more and more anonymous and free and without a risk of being punished. Then I can see you when I want. So when we meet someone face to face, we usually reply in the real time when someone asks us a question, yes? But on the cyberspace, I may choose to write or post something when I want, when I feel ready. This is a very important point when you are, for example, an introvert. Face-to-face, having a dialogue may be difficult, but when you are sitting in the safe environment of your computer at your home, you may reply when you want, when you think about the answer, and feel less stressed. The 3 factors below are maybe associated also with this toxic disinhibition, but anonymity as well. So first, it's all in my head. This is very similar to It's Just a Game. Both of them suggest that what we do online isn't real. So for example, if I hurt someone, I may say, I don't see his blood. Of course, this is a theoretical example. So when I see someone and write him something cruel, I can see that I cannot see that he or she is crying, yes? So it's just a game, it's not real, it's not serious, we are just playing here. These are important sources of toxic disinhibition. And the last one, your rules don't apply here. That means that we ignore usual status, social status that we have face to face. So for example, when you see some people like doctors or scientific or and many other people with some status, we behave face to face like we should do. But maybe we can see that, for example, writing something on Facebook or on other social media makes that people behave more like our status is the same. So your status is the same, so your rules don't apply here, so this is my world and I can do whatever I want. So these 6 factors makes that we behave within our virtual identity the way that we probably will never do on our real self in the real world. So these are the factors along with immersion that makes our virtual identity slightly or very different from the classical identity. Okay, so when someone decides to establish a virtual identity, he or she has to make a variety of decisions throughout the process of its creation. So this is a process characterized by inspirations with a great deal of flexibility, openness, and choice. We may be whoever we want. And we should remember that this is a cyclical process, continuously iterative process, influenced by a variety of individual factors, affected by global cyberspace, but also by local factors as well. And as I told you before, it may be very partially or almost completely true to a true identity. So we may be the same person or totally different. So to finish this topic, we have three perspectives of our virtual identity. The individual relates to the process of creating our own image in cyberspace, usually using avatars or descriptions, hashtags. Avatar is also something that is studied really often. So it may be retouched, it may be filtered, so it may present our ideal self, or we may change who we are, or we may use an avatar of, for example, our dog or cat or children or things that we like or have. So we are attached to our avatar, and it shows other people on the cyberspace who we are, who we think we are. Then we have micro level that represents the elements that serve as the link between the individual user and the global community. So here we have narrative scripts that encompass our virtual life stories, so presents our life, goals, and beliefs. We have virtual intimacy that captures the particular roles assumed by individuals, along with the extent to which they identify with them. We have virtual community that refers to a group membership, and virtual material culture that is an aspect of material culture that we have been talking at the very beginning. And finally, macro level has four facets, and it pertains to the more global community of virtual society. So again, we have narrative scripts that refer to those narrative elements of virtual identity determined by the characteristics of virtual world that we live in. We have virtual intimacy that refers to the extent of willingness or desire to initiate and maintain intimate relationships on the cyberspace. Virtual community, so the community that we choose to be in while being in cyberspace. And once again, virtual material cultures with all its artifacts and social relations. So now let's go to the AI part. As I told you, we will have SWOT analysis. So first we should start with the fact that today we have plenty of various data. So in social sciences, we may use data from digital footprints, mobile sensing devices, wearables, psychological scales, medical records, questionnaires, and probably many more. So these 6 are the most important, in my opinion. What does it mean, digital footprints? That means that we are living in the cyberspace some traces of our online behaviors, the comments that we write, the reviews that we write, our active accounts, our customer choices, our surveys, and data from our mobile applications. We can say cookies here. So all the things that we live in the cyberspace intentionally or unintentionally. So what types of data are we working on? As you may see here, this is not a closed list because I think this is impossible to close it. But we have a very diverse set here. And as you may see, sometimes they're on the 2 ends of the scale. So we have good quality data, but also poor quality data. We have long-term data, but also short-time data. We may have data from specific groups or generalized worldwide data. We may have structures or unstructured data, self-report data or objective, big data, quantitative data, text data, so many types of data. And in my opinion, this is the explanation of why the artificial intelligence fits here so beautifully, because it is more open to big data, to text data, to unstructured data, to complex data that we have from our studies than classical statistical methods. When we are thinking about learning systems, I would like to show here that I think about not only machine learning, but also artificial neural networks that are still used and deep learning that derives from machine learning. So these learning systems have allowed us to devise a range of new methods for collecting data in social sciences. Last years have brought us an amazing progress in the analytic methods that can be used to model complex data. Now, the algorithms are available that use existing data to make predictions about new unseen data, to discover patterns that our human brain couldn't see in such complex sets to our data, or to find maybe groups of similar cases. This is all possible and very valuable for social studies. So the increasing availability of learning systems is poised to drastically alter the way we perform our social and psychological research and undertake the virtual identity studies. Okay, so let's go back to our SWOT analysis. I put here both strengths and opportunities of what we may gain when we are implementing learning systems into social sciences. So at first, analyzing bit sets of data, then handling multidimensional and multivariety data. So in our set, we may have not only, for example, numeric data, but also text data, voice data, image data, etc., etc. We may analyze various digital footprints. We may automate the process. We may find trends and relationships that are invisible to human researchers because for our human brain, it is impossible to search for trends when we have thousands and thousands of records in our data. Learning systems are also called learning due to the fact that they can improve themselves continuously. What is also very important for social sciences, especially, that these systems deal not only with labeled data, but also with non-labeled data. So, for example, when in my studies I have labeled data, I may, for example, have some medical reports that are having diagnosis, for example, depressed or without depression. So if each record is selected as depressed or non-depressed, I have labeled data and it is easier for me to make learning systems, but non-labeled data is also not a problem. Yes, when, for example, I have data from the internet, not from medical records, yes, and I am searching for trends and I don't even know what am I particularly looking for. This may be also performed with learning systems. And finally, last but not least, we may skip some assumptions required for classical statistical approach, but we should be aware of that many of these rules derived from statistics, these assumptions, should be checked before we are performing our model construction. We should be also aware of the negative part. At this first slide, as you may see, each rectangle is marked with an asterisk, yes, with this little star symbol. Why? Because I wanted to show you that, yes, these are threats and weaknesses of learning AI systems, but also they are threats and weaknesses of classical statistical approach. So with using these arguments, we cannot say that AI systems is weaker than classical approach, but that both of these approaches are very prone to these things, and we should be, as researchers, always responsible to check them. So the first one is conducting analysis without a sufficient theoretical background. So first we should do some literature review about if similar studies were conducted. This will provide us theoretical backgrounds that, for example, will help us to choose our variables. Then, temptation to act opportunistically. So using our results without checking if they have sense, that they are not a mistake of an algorithm or just not real, they don't have any sense, yes? Then we have requirement of diligent data pre-processing. If you will have poor quality data, AI systems may be a little bit more flexible, but to be honest, if you have poor data, your learning systems will also be poor. So it doesn't matter if you use classical statistical approach or AI-based approach, your data should be pre-processed very well. And also using self-reported psychological scales. Many researchers are not fond of these scales because they are self-reported, and self-reported studies are prone to not giving the right answers due to many reasons. This is very interesting topic. If you would like to read a little bit more about it, I highly recommend. And we have high error susceptibility when having a biased training set. For example, there was a deep learning algorithm that is very widely presented online when researchers want to classify two breeds of dogs, but the one husky was usually represented on snow, while the other, I do not remember, let's say hound, was presented on a grass. So in the end, the algorithm wasn't able to tell about breed, but he classified the photos based on a grass or snow. So a biased training set, because all the photos were on the same background, gave us a biased results. Okay, these factors, as you may see, there are quite few of them, are typical for AI systems. So first, using a large various data sets may result in finding apparently significant dependencies. So they are not really significant. The relationships between variables in social sciences are not usually as strong as in other societies. This will be discussed when I present you the example. We have also generalizability dilemma and the black box problem, selecting acceptable levels of performance and specific data acquisition. I wouldn't read all of them because I see that we are running out of time, but I would like you to remember that there are many factors that makes this solution not perfect, but when we will act responsible as researchers, we may reduce most of them. So now let's see two studies. First, I presented you some psychological scales that are quite wide research, so you may use it in your research with AI-based algorithms. So the big five that describes openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. I describe it here. But also we have the dark triad that is about more negative features of human nature, the hexacle model that is very similar to the big five, and hacks that, for example, I usually use when I want to check if a cyberspace brings us anxiety or depression, or if people who are anxious or depressed behave differently on the cyberspace. So two examples from my practice. The first study was called Artificial Neural Networks for Predicting Social Comparison Effects Among Female Instagram Users. And the goal here was to use life satisfaction, self-esteem, anxiety, depression, and the intensity of Instagram use scales to define a social comparison model that could be positive, negative, or equal, so nor positive nor negative. And the networks that I made, the algorithms, were able to properly predict between 71 and 82% of cases. And I found it to be a satisfactory result, because it may be not so high as in the finances, for example, or in classical medical data, but we should remember that in social sciences, 60% is a huge correlation. So we cannot expect that our learning systems will give us 90-something% of prediction. And here is one of my latest studies, and I think this is a very important because it shows that here learning systems weren't good. It was about social and psychological consequences of COVID-19 online content at the lockdown phase. I tried to build models here using artificial neural networks, but then I focused only on classical statistical approach. It was a comparison between European and Asian origin participants, and the questionnaires included some psychological scales that were related to the lockdown when we had to stay at home. So it was life satisfaction, anxiety and depression, and also some demographic data and some questions about how we use social media when we are closed at our homes to COVID. And as you may see, the sample was quite huge, but unfortunately, the majority of participants were from Europe. And I checked the data that they were not affected by common method bias. The Shapiro-Wilk test also rejected the assumption of normality. So it affected, I think, the results of AI systems. And Cronbach alpha for each scale was also good. I have found, using classical statistical approach, various dependencies, but still, as for social sciences, they were average. So it resulted then that artificial neural networks generated poor learning systems results. So to sum up my speech, we should be aware that learning systems are not perfect, but still they are very, very promising, and I think that we definitely should try to implement it in social and psychological studies. They offer new great possibilities of data analysis. They have many requirements, that's true, but also numerous advantages. Sometimes we should try a hybrid solution when we have learning systems outcomes confronted with classical statistical methods. This may be also a good solution to prevent from reviewers that claim that AI systems are a black box, and sometimes they are opposing publishing such papers. So I think that learning systems in the social sciences approach is extremely promising. And with that, I would like to thank you very much for your kind attention. I think I have 5 minutes more of my time, so I deeply apologize for these 5 minutes. Thank you very much for your attention. And if you would like to contact me, you can see my email here. Write me whenever you want. Thank you once again very much.
Thank you, Dr. Marta. It was a very detailed study on, say, psychology, social behavior of individual, and your study is so detailed, and you have taken almost all direction of, say, psychology mixing with the people, the behavioral science. So it was a very elaborate study. So I am very sure that you are leading a very detailed research in your institute, university. Thank you, Dr. Marta.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Professor Marta.
Any question from our student? Because Madam is applying the theory of cognitive science, artificial intelligence into the behavioral science. So, which is very, say, intersection of these two science is very narrow. And if any of the student will be interested for any question, then they can directly ask or put it in the chat box. Okay, so
No question.
I think that there is no question. Thank you, madam, for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye. Have a nice day.
Bye.
And the rest
Bye.
of the conference. Bye-bye.
Have a nice day. So our sessions are now starting. So this author, listener, and student, please join respective session links.